So today I get to have a conversation with my buddy Wayne Turmel. Wayne, I've known Wayne, gosh, 3 iterations of jobs, though he's had a ton more. I didn't know him back when he was a stand-up comic, though he's funny as hell. I did know him back when he was a sales guy. I known him when he was a podcaster with Cranky Middle Manager, which is one of my favorite old podcasts. We had a lot of fun on that, and I love to always listen into that with Wayne. And then he's got great web meetings and Remote Leadership Institute and stuff with Kevin Eikenberry. But then he decided, I'm going to write a fiction book. I'm like, what? No, really? You're going to write a fiction book? And it's really good. I mean, Account of the Sahara is a fantastic book. It's easy to read. But, dude, change. There you go. Shameless, baby. Yeah, show us the book. But the question, I guess, that I have, and really why I want to have this conversation, though certainly we're going to show a little bit about the book, is, Wayne, how do you feel comfortable with all this change that's happened in your world? How do you get comfortable with that? Or how do you just do it?
Boy, I don't know that anybody ever gets comfortable with change. Well, that's not entirely true. You know the difference between change and innovation?
No.
When it's your idea, it's innovation.
There we go. Change and innovation. That's awesome.
That's the thing. Life is all about change, right? And my attitude has always kind of been, life is going to change. You can get with the program and change with it. You can help direct where that change goes, or you can, hang on by your fingernails and hope you don't get thrown out when it goes around a curve. And really, that's it. And so, because I know life is changing, and I know that my life has changed many times, as everybody's has, you just kind of go, okay, where am I going, and how do I prepare myself so that the change is either what I want it to be or less traumatic and horrible than it could be.
Yeah, no, so that's good. So the fact that that it's going to change, I think acceptance, right, is kind of step one. And what you're saying is just understanding that, because if we try to fight, right, it's like trying to fight against a tidal wave. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Well, I mean, once you realize that life is a terminal disease,
there we go.
Everything else is a matter of perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, this latest change, and it's not a full-blown change. I mean, it's not like I've thrown everything and moved to a desert island with a typewriter, and that's what I'm doing for a living now. But this is another evolution, right, in my life, and it's one that I went after consciously and kind of planned for, as I have more or less the other changes in what's passed for my life. And as you say, the career has not exactly been linear, which is how I prefer it, frankly. But I am constantly amazed at the number of people who are just wildly uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, Wayne? I mean, you like me, you travel a little bit, right? You do a lot of speaking, and you do a lot more remotely probably than I do, as far as, web meetings and stuff like that. But you do talk to a ton of people. Why do you think, people, even, from 20 to 200, why do you think people are so averse to just even the inkling that it's going to change?
Well, I think it's partly biological. I think that some people are programmed to seek the new, the different. They're excited and energized by that. I think most people aren't. I think it goes back to the caveman. I think, most people's instinct was stay near the cave. Don't wander too far, because there are things that will eat you. And by the way, there were things that will eat you. So, it wasn't an unreasonable fear, but there were also some small percentage of people whose job was to go out hunting the mastodons, and you had to go where the mastodons were, right? And maybe there's a bigger cave somewhere, and maybe there's water somewhere. And, so I think some people are kind of biologically programmed to embrace the change and seek the change, seek the new, seek the novel, while most people aren't. And the other thing is, I think that as we reach a stage in our life Our programming catches up with us. Think about the phrases, don't rock the boat, the nail that sticks up gets hit with the hammer, grow where you're planted. All these things that our parents told us, and it's funny, some places, I find people in the Midwest are like this, right? If you live 20 miles from where your parents planted you, you left home.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm on my second country and fourth time zone, and, we're talking about moving again. So whatever, it's partly, so it's partly programming. We're programmed, you have to be stable, you have to be secure. And then as we get older, we have responsibilities, and we're responsible for other human beings. Who was it? John Locke, I think, said that the reason art doesn't get made by old people is because we are hostages to fortune. If we're going to chase our dreams, if we're going to move across the country, if we're going to attempt to do something in the arts, if we're going to start a business, it needs to be when we don't have a spouse and kids and people who rely on us.
But is that really true, Wayne? I mean, really, right? We see that so many people now are moving and making changes and doing things maybe that are completely different from what's expected, and that is starting to work. I mean, I moved to Tampa. Yeah, okay, maybe I'm just responsible for me, but I can tell you that it's I'm seeing more of that, right? Maybe not in the Midwest. Moving from Milwaukee to Tampa, yeah, that's a big move. I have a lot of people that were like, holy cow, you did this. But now I'm realizing there's a lot of people down here, most of which are not from here.
But you have to understand, there are certain places in the world. Florida is one and California is the other, who are basically made up of the black sheep of their respective families. I mean, California, if you think about California, especially in the 20th century, it was the black sheep, the restless ones, the gold seekers, the whatever. They just basically did that American thing and kept moving west until they hit water. I mean, any further west, you'd have to learn Japanese. And so California is essentially made up of the black sheeps, the wanderers, the people who don't think like everybody else. And then they stayed inbred with other people who had the same genetic makeup.
There you go.
The same way because of, the invention of things like air conditioning and things like that. Florida suddenly became the new California. And it's funny, when you think about in the 20th century, I can remember when anything weird or crazy or said, well, it had to be California. Right? Now it's Florida, man.
Cool. I'm glad I moved.
So there are places, I think, that become kind of repositories for people like that notion of reinvention. The whole American West was built on, I don't like what this is. I hate my boss. I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. I'm packing up the kids in the Conestoga wagon and heading west. Right? That's the history of this. That's the history of this whole.
That's interesting.
And so I think what's happened, though, is it's partly technology has allowed us to up and move. I mean, my wife and I are talking about moving back to the West Coast. And where do you want to live? Look, I got two requirements, broadband and an airport.
Me too.
Give me broadband and an airport with decent connections, and I can literally live anywhere.
Yeah.
So technology has certainly made it easier. We can work from wherever we want to be, right? We're not tied to wherever, depending on the job that you do.
Sure.
But more and more, that's becoming possible. I mean, what you and I are doing right now on a free application on a couple of laptop computers was Jetson stuff. When I was growing up, the idea of the video screen and the video call was science fiction.
Yep.
So technology has allowed us to do it. The other thing is the economy and the way the world works has changed. The social contract that we had, your old man got a job and he stayed in that job and he got regularly promoted and he did his job and then he retired and he got the pension and the gold watch and whatever. Well, that was what my generation was raised on. You kind of caught the tail end of that. Well, you can't sell that to anybody today because we know it's not true. You know, congratulations, you've been with us 20 years, yet now you're too expensive, we're laying you off.
Yeah. Yep.
And so the social contract that kept us rooted in one place, you'd buy a house and then, you know, you'd sell the house when you were ready to retire. None of that stuff exists anymore, so why not go after it?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question, right? And we think about that homesteading of how it used to be. So why not, right? So I think that is an important question that folks who are maybe afraid of change, that they should be asking themselves, is why not, right? And I actually, ironically, wore this shirt today without even thinking about it. And it says, have you tried restarting? You know, and that's something that I think about a lot. I've changed my life so many times, and I'm not telling you to restart, but I'm thinking, have you tried it? Like, if it's so scary, have you tried it? Or is it just a fear that you have? Maybe that's rational. Maybe there are wolves at the door. There are brontosaurus that will eat you, but maybe not.
Well, you know, the truth of the matter is that everybody has a different comfort level, but it all starts, and I don't care what it is, everything starts with, where do you want to go, right? What do you want to do? If your priority is, I want to work and I want to raise my family and I want to raise my family near my family and I want a good job, but, you know, I don't want the stress of starting my own business, then stay where you are and work a job that doesn't suck and live your life, and God love you. But if, you know, more and more, we want a little control, we want more than we have now, and that can become pathological and bad for you. I mean, I just finished watching season 2 of Fargo. And basically, this all started because Kirsten Dunst was out of her damn mind. But, you know, what is it that you want? Is what you want positive? Is it healthy? Is it all that stuff? And then, well, if that's what you want, what's stopping you from doing it? Is it a lack of education? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of skill? I mean, I have made peace with the fact that I will never play shortstop for the Chicago Cubs.
Well, they just traded away Castro, though. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty positive.
All right.
The game.
We'll let you give up that dream, Wayne.
Yeah, I know. Put a stake in it. But I'm pretty sure that that's not going to happen, right? There are things that are unrealistic. But there are things that are realistic. And if you say, this is what I want, well, you can't have it. Why not? Well, you know, I'm a 54-year-old fat guy with no arm. I'm probably not going to play shortstop for the Cubs. That's a pretty safe bet. On the other hand, you know, I've always wanted to write a novel. I've written 7 nonfiction books. I've written for blogs and websites and all this stuff for years. I speak. I've always been an avid reader, and I'll never be a real writer until I write a book, a novel. Okay, go write a novel. Well, what do you mean go write a novel? I don't know how to do it. I don't even know where to start. All right, here's a stack of Reader's Digest magazines. Start reading. Right? And I've read Reader's Digest or Writer's Digest my whole life. And, you know, and so now, okay, so people can do this. I see how this works. Okay. And so have you got a story? Well, let me think. Yeah, I've got the story of this guy, this real life character that is just fascinating to me. And it's, you know, set in the 1920s, and it's got archaeology and drunkenness and bootleggers and all kinds of stuff. It's a great story. Okay. But I don't know how to structure a novel. I wouldn't know where to start. Well, a friend of mine at LA Writers Labs has a book called The 90-Day Novel. Write a novel in 90 days. Okay. So, you know, out comes the book. Matter of fact, it's sitting right here on my shelf. Look at that. You know, page 1.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? So everybody has done what you've done. And by that, I mean, if you want to do something, I'm sure there's at least one person in the world who's done it, and there's probably 50 people who've written products about it. Let's just be honest, right? So there's tons out there. No more excuses. I don't know how is not an excuse. You don't have the money. My goodness, you can get a whiteboard and write a page a day, right? I mean, there's no longer any excuse for not following.
Yeah, I think that there are, the laws of physics start to come into play. I mean, lack of resources, lack of money is not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's a hell of a barrier for a lot of people.
Sure.
I mean, it's not like I'm sitting there cranking out novels and that's how I make my living now. I mean, I could buy a really nice dinner on my royalties so far.
For you or for you and me?
Just for me. You're on your own, buddy. You're not in driving distance anymore. So resources are a legitimate issue, and there are ways to get around it, right? Education. Well, I got an associate's degree burning a hole in my pocket. It's not like I've got a PhD. There are no shortage of resources, especially on the internet, to help you educate yourself. There are people that you can learn from. There are groups for everything in this world. Formal education, a college degree is not in everybody's reach necessarily, but maybe that's not what you need.
Yeah. I think that's important to say, right? There is no prescriptive way to get success like there once was. We used to think, right, we have to be born into a good family, or we have to go from high school to college to finish a degree, or go in the military or something like that. Now, there's very few jobs. I mean, sure, doctors and attorneys and things that require some licensing, yeah. But most things that you can dream, you can do. I mean, it might take years, that your novel in 90 days, if you've never written anything, that can be much harder. But right. Still, if you put it in, let's say 9 months, and you take each day and you make them 10 days, for instance, you can still do it. You just need a little bit more persistence, right?
Well, what you've said there is really important. And it's funny because the likes of you and me, people for whom change adoption comes naturally, and as a matter of fact, because I have the attention span of an Irish setter, it's actually mandatory.
Yep.
Right? Change is not something to be avoided. It's the next thing that you expect to do. So we're genetically programmed a little differently than most mortals, let's face it. But how do you make a change? You make a change the same way you always have, in the same way we have everything in our lives. You identify the goal, right? What is it that I want to do? You take a look at what are the things I need to do to get there, right? So if I want to have a novel out in the world, okay, I need to write a novel. I need to find a publisher. I need to do whatever. Okay, great. But you don't start with finding a publisher. Right? So once we've got the pieces, what are the pieces that we have to do? Okay, now how do I order these? What comes first? What comes, and if you're into project management, what does your timeline look like and what overlaps? And, so you need to set your goals. SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, all that stuff. And I know this is taking life changes and art and all this stuff and making it very
doable,
processed. But it's doable, is the point. It's taking it out of the realm of whatever, and it's laying it out and saying, this is how you do it. And all of those horrible cliches, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Well, I hate to tell you,
it does.
Actually, kind of does. There's no way to duck that.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is you're doing, and I'm having this conversation with my daughter who's in her early 20s, and I want to do this or that, and it's too hard, and I don't know. Well, yeah, it is hard. Nobody said this is not easy, what we're talking about here. And very often you'll find that where you think you're going isn't where you're going. But if you don't lay it out, if you don't start with the goal and then break it up into chunks and then break those chunks into chunks and then actually plan and take action on those small individual chunks, nothing happens.
Yeah. No, that's such great advice, Wayne, that we can break this up, right? Writing a novel when you've never written one can feel daunting. You found a map, a GPS really, right in that book, that Write a Novel in 90 Days, that is available to all of us that we could do. And if we do break apart our big, scary goals into smaller, manageable pieces, yes, it makes them more doable, but it also makes them more real because you realize, man, do I want to give up X for Y, right? Because it's always a trade-off. I can tell you, I'm sure, Wayne, that there are things that when you were writing that novel that you didn't get to do, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the other thing is we're assuming that the changes we're talking about are voluntary.
There you go.
If we go back to the early 90s, I had spent 15, 16 years without a day job as a professional stand-up comic. I'd, done clubs and TV and whatever, and I left Canada and I moved to Los Angeles, and then the bottom fell out of the business and I had a wife and a kid. Uh-oh, right? This whole becoming a star thing obviously isn't going to happen. So what do? So I flailed around for a little bit. Gee, I'm thinking the training business is something that might make some sense. Kind of builds on some natural skills, whatever. So what's the training business? How do you get into it? What's the best way? I found an association. The association now it's the Association for Talent Development. It used to be American Society for Training and Development. I started going to local meetings and learning the business and meeting people and figuring it out. And from there, I got my first training job. And from there, the next 20 years of my life.
Wow.
What do you want to do? How do you get there? Break it into steps and follow the steps. And if you don't like where you're going, you go back and start over again.
Yeah. But I think one other thing, Wayne, that you said that's really important there is you found people like you that you could learn from, learn with, kind of collaborate, share some fear maybe, talk about what it takes to be a success, and then dip your toe in by getting your first gig.
Professional associations are hugely important, and they're not terrible. I mean, I would take $25 that we really didn't have and go to an ASTD chapter meeting, and if I couldn't afford it the next month, I wouldn't go. But I would meet people, and then I'd network them, and so on and so on until I knew enough people and I started to learn the business and, okay, I can do that. And I heard, so-and-so's hiring and check here. And when I started to write my novel, once I had a couple of chapters down, I went and I found the Naperville Writers Group. And I found people who could read and critique my work and who understood what I was doing and frankly got me out of the house because I work out of a home office. I wasn't ever leaving the house. I needed to get out among humans. Right? And so whether it's a big change, a little change, a career change, a trivial hobby avocation change, the process is the same.
Yeah. Awesome. So we talked a lot about the process. Let's talk about the final product. Let's talk about your book a little bit, Wayne, because I know,
darn. Okay.
Right? I know you're going to be disappointed here, but no, really, I think, in addition to the fact that it's a great story of how you got to the book, let's talk about the book because it really is entertaining. I do think that, if people pick it up, if you're looking for a fiction book that's written by someone who has a sense of humor and who actually can tell a story, this is probably a pretty good book for you. So tell us about the plot, Wayne. Why is The Count of the Sahara? Why is this something that people want to read?
Well, I think that there's a number of reasons, but the simple plot is this. In 1925, a very young archaeologist named Byron de Prorock, who had a Polish title, he was Count Byron de Prorock, handsome, young, whatever, went on an expedition to the Algerian Sahara to dig up a Tuareg tomb. And it was splattered all over the front page of the New York Times, and he was the most famous archaeologist in the world for that moment. And then he went on a lecture tour through the Midwest in the winter of 1926, and by spring of 1926, his career was over, his life was in ruins, his marriage was shot, and it's the story of what happened. So it kind of runs on two tracks. The first track is winter of 1926. A young kid from Milwaukee hooks up to be his assistant on this lecture tour. And it's the story of what happens on the lecture tour. But it also, every other chapter goes back to what really happened on the expedition. And how the two things may not necessarily jive, and how de Proroc's story of what happened and what really happened maybe weren't the same thing. And I think to our conversation, I think de Proroc is a terrific character because he embodies not only the possibilities. I mean, he was had a fairly terrible, awful childhood, genteel poverty, made himself into this media character. He'd have been an ideal Kardashian because he was a complete, media creation. And yet, because he didn't do the things he needed to do, it was all a facade. And when it went bad in a hurry.
Awesome.
And so it's that I'm fascinated. And, if I had a therapist, she'd be able to tell you why. I'm fascinated by people who have all the tools for success, who should be these amazing successes and can't get out of their own way. And history is full of characters. My house is full of characters who fit that description. But Proroc is just such a great example of somebody who had the tools to really be something special. And, 30 years later, died drunk on a train.
Wow. Yeah. Well, to kind of bring that full circle, Wayne, we all have the tools to be a success. Many of us may not realize that they're there, but many of us have those tools, unless, there may be challenges that we have to overcome, and success may happen in differing levels, but we have something very special inside of us that we have to get out of us in order to find our level of success. And your question about why do smart people, why do savvy people, why do people that should be successful, why don't they get out of their own way? And I think a lot of that is self-belief or self-doubt.
Oh, absolutely. The voices in your head that Carl Jung says sounds like your father. I think it depends on.
Sorry, I'm a reindeer. Keep going.
The voices in your head, if you listen to them, can either guide you or destroy you. And we all have those voices, those things that we have been taught. Sometimes they're family dynamics, sometimes they're cultural, sometimes they are historical. Nobody like you has ever done that before, right? And whether that's being the first, if you're Barack Obama, taking very obvious, giant steps. If you are female and girls don't do that. If you are, we've never had somebody like you do that before. Those voices can, be pretty overpowering.
Yeah.
And you can't ignore them completely. I mean, the little voice in your head is there for a reason, right? Pinocchio, if you do that, you'll never be a real boy. I call that the Jiminy Cricket voice.
Yep.
You have to listen to that, right? But there's this cacophony, and for some of us, there's more than one voice. There's a lot of voices going on up there, and you have to take it and process it. And when it says, no, you can't do that, the next question is, well, why? And if the answer is, because, then it's not a real answer. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's so important, right? Even asking that one question is so powerful and can unlock such success, right? Russell Wilson, the quarterback of the Seahawks, 5'11", 200 pounds, should not be playing professional football as a quarterback. By all intents and measures, he's not Tom Brady, right? He's not Peyton Manning. He's not larger than life. And yet, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the game. And he says the reason why is because when everybody else was asking, why me? He added one word, why not me?
Right.
And that's so powerful, right? Just that extra pause, why not me? Maybe it's a good reason. You're not going to play shortstop for the Cubs because you're not 21 and tall and lanky any longer. Okay, right. That's great, Wayne, no problem. But why not write a novel? Well, hell, there's no reason why not.
Right. And I always remember the studio heads when they were looking at Fred Astaire and the studio scouts, and there's a famous report on Fred Astaire that said, too skinny, balding, can dance a little.
Yeah.
Those were the people who supposedly knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, that's true.
I am neither skinny, balding, nor able to dance. But, all my life, people have told me why I can't do things. I mean, I've written 8 books now. I've, had a good career in the training industry, and I don't even have a college degree.
Yeah.
It's doable. And boy, I realized how horrible that sounded, because I'm not one of those self-help gurus. I pulled myself up from the gutter and you can too. I'm a guy, and I'm living and I'm making my way, and that you can do. I mean, not everybody's going to be Tony Robbins, but you can make your way.
Yeah. Not everybody needs to be Tony Robbins. You just need the best you, right? That's really it. I can tell you, I've struggled with that for a long time, right? I grew up in challenging times too, and I'm certainly not going to, go into my story here because this is about you, my friend, but whatever it is that you want to be, right? Be the best you. That's it. Just be the best version of you, whatever the hell that means to you. Just be that and get over some of that fear and ask why not.
And nobody else's vision of success matters.
No, that's right.
That's the thing. When I was doing the cranky middle manager, it used to make me furious, because just the word middle manager makes people laugh, right? Ha ha ha, you weren't good enough to become an executive. But for a lot of people, especially of an earlier generation, middle management was something you aspired to, because you would start at the lowest levels of the company, and over time, you would reach a level of responsibility. You were making a nice living. You could take care of your family, and it was something to be proud of. Instead, it became a joke. So your version of whatever success is, whatever you want your life to be, is what you need to work on. It's not going to be, I guarantee it's not going to be my version, but my version is not going to be somebody else's.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other discussion for a whole other day, is how do you recognize what your version of that is? Because everything starts with, that's my version of success. So now, what does that look like? So now, how do I get there? So now, what are the steps to how do I start? And we're back to the process again.
Yeah. Wow. So much to talk about. We'll definitely do that in another conversation. But Wayne, last but not least, buddy, hold up the book and remind people, how do they get more of your goodness? Where do they get more of the Count of Sahara? Where do they get more Wayne Turmel? Because I really, and I mean this, Wayne, I love learning from you, because you take a look at things in a way that's unlike how many people do. And it's humorous and it's light, and yet it's serious in the results. And I love that. So tell us a little bit.
Well, the novel you can get at Amazon in Kindle or paperback form. WayneTurmel.com is really about my fiction writing and that kind of thing. So you can visit me at WayneTurmel.com. GreatWebMeetings.com is my company. And if you go on Amazon and just check out my author page, you'll see books like Meet Like You Mean It and some other things that are the more businessy type of works that I've done. You can start at WayneTurmel.com, go to Amazon, check out my author page, and, when in doubt, you can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah. You're at Wayne Turmel on Twitter, or W. Turmel?
At W. Turmel.
W. Turmel on Twitter, Turmel. So
that is correct.
Yeah. So Wayne, you've got to come down to Tampa, man. I'll buy the beer. Cigar City Brewing is fantastic. I think you'd really like it.
You know what? We'll start with the cigars.
You're
We'll go
on.
to Ybor City and do some of that.
Good enough.
And we'll make it happen, brother.
Cool. That'll be great. Well, thanks for the conversation, Wayne. It is always fun to talk to you. I hope everyone learned a lot. WayneTurmel.com. That's WayneTurmel.com. Author of The Count of the Sahara and other awesome stuff. Thanks, buddy.
All right, buddy. Have a great one.